Welcome to the Christian Men at Work podcast, where I interview men from all walks of life with varying job titles who have one thing in common. They are all choosing daily to live out their Christian faith through their work, and because of that they are leading, prospering, glorifying God, and experiencing joy and purpose in their work, and you can too. Welcome, Men at Work, to episode 23. Before I get to our interview today with Mike Westrich, I would like to ask you a favor. Recently, I was invited to be interviewed on another podcast, which has similar content to this one. And one big difference is that this podcast reaches a lot of more men. It receives about 100 times the downloads that this podcast receives. And trust me, I value each and every one of you who are listening, but this got me thinking. I know this content is really valuable, and I would like more men to hear it. And I have done a poor job of using the tools that are available to get the word out and make it easier to find this podcast. One thing this person who's going to be interviewing me did is one of the first things he did in the process was he asked me to go to iTunes and give a review for his podcast. And so I want to do that. I have 0 reviews, I am ashamed to admit, for this podcast on iTunes, and I've never even thought about it. And so I'm going to ask a favor of you. I'm going to ask you to go to iTunes to search for the main page for this podcast, Christian Men at Work, and to click on the button to give a review. And I'm going to provide a link that'll take you straight there on my website at davehilgendorf.com. I'm also going to provide a link at the end of the show notes for this episode, and I will continue to do that in the future. So that would really help a lot. I would also ask you to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already. That'll allow you to automatically get new episodes. But I think the best way to get the word out and to make it easier for someone who's looking for this type of podcast to actually find this one is to start getting reviews on iTunes. So I would really appreciate that. So that's it on that, and let's get right to our interview. Mike Westrich is a U.S. Air Force reservist currently working for the Integrated Air Defense Squadron, or IADS, at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, NASIC, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which by itself sounds like a kind of a spy movie right off the bat. So I'm pretty intrigued, or I was pretty intrigued when I first started reading Mike's intro. He works full-time as a global strategic category buyer for Caterpillar, the Building Construction Products Division. He graduated from Miami University in 2005 with a Bachelor of Arts, after which he was commissioned into the Air Force. He was on active duty for 6 years as an intelligence officer, worked 4 years at the 712th Air and Space Operations Squadron at Fort Hood, Texas, and 2 years at the 4th Intelligence Squadron at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. He deployed twice to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. Since leaving the active duty component in August 2011, he obtained his master's in business administration from North Carolina State in 2013 and has been working for Caterpillar since June of 2013. Let's get right to our interview.
Mike, thanks for joining the call today. My first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about when and how you became a Christian?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, Dave. Name is Mike Westrich, and I was really baptized into it, I guess. I grew up Catholic and baptized as a baby. I forget how old. But then I've been in the church as a child and stayed through that, through high school and through college. But I was never born again, let's say, but just re-energized at various points in my life, including, when I went to college and made more friends that were of diverse faiths and started participating in Christian churches other than Catholic churches. So I think that really re-energized my faith and strengthened my faith, actually, I would say.
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your life that led you up to joining the military? I understand you were an intelligence officer. How did you end up doing that?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't know what I was going to do when I went to college. I went to Miami University in Ohio. I'm originally from Cincinnati, and that university is about an hour from Cincinnati. And didn't know what I wanted to do. So freshman year, I had no way to pay for college. Took out a bank loan and started making friends and heard about this Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC. Decided to join and check it out. And then, once I made friends and liked it and was good at it, the discipline and the customs and courtesies and the training and all that, decided to stick with it. And that was a 4-year contract commitment. And of course, a month or so after I joined, that's when 9/11 happened, and it really strengthened my resolve to join the military. And then the way it works in ROTC is, depending on your class, grade point average, and lots of other factors, helps determine what career field you get as you leave ROTC. And I was Air Force, but I think this is similar in the other branches. And so I didn't know if I wanted to make a full career out of it. I was always more apt towards, qualitative over quantitative. So I put intelligence as my number one choice, and I did well in school, and I ended up getting intelligence. And then, once you commission and join, you go off to your various schools. So I went to intelligence school, and so that's how I got into intelligence.
Well, thanks for your service, first of all. And I'm sure whenever I talk with someone who's been in the military, I like to ask them just if they could share some stories. And I realize, especially with the field you were in, there's, things that are confidential that you can't share. But can you tell us maybe what your scariest moment was while you were in the military, first of all?
Yeah, that's always a good question. And every time I run into other veterans or active duty, they always have good stories. So it's fun hanging out with military folks because they normally have good stories. So yeah, depending on different prompts, I can tell different stories. But the scariest is probably the second time in Iraq. I was in Baghdad, and a large rocket landed probably 100 feet away from me, so causing a big explosion. And a bunch of us that were nearby dove and got out of the way. And fortunately, we weren't injured, but lots of people were injured, and at least a dozen were killed, if I remember correctly. This was back in 2009, 10-ish. So that was probably the scariest moment. And part of that, when you're on any base, is you don't hear rockets or artillery. So if you hear it, if it's whistling by you, you're kind of safe. And if you don't hear anything, that's when it's dangerous, and that's when it's close. So you get kind of used to it, and you don't really worry about it. If you worried about it, you would kind of worry yourself to death. That was probably the scariest moment, I would say.
How about, have you been able to stay in touch with your friends from the military?
Yeah. Most of my roommates, and then others I went to college with. And then you meet people throughout active duty because you go to so many different training courses. So yeah, it's periodic. It's obviously not all the time because it's in different locations around the U.S. and the globe, but so that's the trade-off. I mean, you have lots of friends, and they're good friends. You don't see them as much, and they're scattered across the world, but that's a good thing. You usually can see them and have a free place to stay. So.
Can you think of a moment where you were maybe the most proud of the military and of our country when you were serving?
Yeah, the most proud was also the most difficult, and actually the best team I was ever on. And it was, again, the second time to Iraq, and it was a spy plane called the MC-12, and I can't get into too many details about it, but it was the fastest fielded weapon system since the P-51 Mustang in World War II, and there was a need for it. And I won't get into the capabilities as much, but there was a need for this type of aircraft, and as a result of being fast fielded into the war, there were lots of challenges, and the team was over 120 people or so, pilots and intel and other folks, and it was challenging because it was very diverse, which is challenging on one hand, but it ultimately produces great results, lots of different backgrounds, thoughts. You know, we do what's called like you norm, and then you form the team, and then you storm, you fight, then you norm, it becomes normal, then you perform, and it ended up becoming the best team I've ever been on. You know, I had a lot of fighting in the beginning, but ended up being the best results and the best impact, and it was really good.
Now, after the military, you went to work for Caterpillar.
Yep,
tell us what you do for tell us what you do for Caterpillar.
So I've been in Caterpillar's Building Construction Products division, which is headquartered in Cary, North Carolina. I've been there for a little over 5 years, and all within the supply chain management organization, primarily in procurement, managing suppliers or vendors. So suppliers make parts that go on our machines, and I work with the sellers of those suppliers and manage the cost and work on quality, shipping, etc. So yeah, been doing that for a little over 5 years.
What are some of the main differences you've noticed about what it's like to work in the military versus in a corporate position like you have?
So, I mean, the military's tried over the years to become flatter, but it's obviously still hierarchical, orders, etc. Depending where you are in private sector, it can be really flat, or it can be hierarchical and corporate, and rules and regulations and things like that. I still think the biggest difference, though, is in the military you have the camaraderie, which is the best thing about the military. Obviously, there are other restrictions and limitations and so forth, but you don't have the same camaraderie in the private sector. But in the private sector, you have more freedom, and I cherish that freedom. So I think that is the biggest difference, I would say.
Let me ask you, what does it mean to you to live out your Christian faith through your work? And then, if in addition, can you talk about maybe how you found that to be different between the military and living in or working in a corporate position?
Yeah. So corporate and living out the faith is, I mean, it can be challenging. My faith is very important to me, and it holds me accountable. So, I'm not perfect, and when I'm challenged with things or struggling, and a lot of the work is relationship based. So I try to go back to my faith, and it holds me accountable with reminders throughout the day, but I need to take the initiative and do that. My kind of approach over the years has been to try to be friends with, colleagues first, and you don't have to be, close friends, but try to be friendly with people, and once they get to know you and trust you, and then opportunities come later when you can share your faith. I've found it doesn't really work that well if you just right out of the gate try to share your faith when you first meet somebody. So my approach has been try to get to know the person first and be friends with them, and I try to use the acronym JOY as a reminder to me, which has helped focus on thanking Jesus first, and then thinking of others, asking how others are, and then finally on yourself. And that acronym's kind of helped me.
I've not heard that before. That's really good. It's very simple, but yeah, I'm gonna keep that in mind. That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, it's more like a recent thing I heard in the last year. It's helped me sometimes you get inward focused and focus on yourself, and bad things happen if you're always focused on self-interest in yourself.
Yeah, that's true with every part of our lives, I would say. So.
Yeah.
Hey, before we leave the topic of your career specifically, I just wanted to ask, would you mind sharing kind of what, for those of us who maybe, what do you think is, or maybe you're wondering, what do you think the state of our military is right now? I mean, you hear different things in the news, but how would you describe the state of our military?
Yeah, so I'm still in the reserves, so I can't divulge too much. And then this is just my personal opinion, so I can't speak on behalf of anybody. So just as a reminder, this is my personal opinion. But overall, I mean, the military is still the best in the world. We're still the strongest. We have the most resources, the most money, great talent. And then the limitations, I think, are in aging infrastructure. And you see that in the news. Just old aircraft, old Navy ships, decades old. And we can talk about the reasons elsewhere about why that is, but it's just a lot of aging infrastructure. So I would say that's probably the greatest need. And then I think, like any organization, the military is not immune from politicization, especially in the intel career field, but that's always a temptation, I think, in any organization, is become too political, too politically correct, and too politicized. But the military is still the greatest in the world, and it's like one of our best institutions, in my opinion, in the U.S.
All right, before we, I wanted to ask you some specific questions about work in general. Before I do that, I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you want to share a little bit about the book that you've been writing. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm really excited. So, writing's always been a hobby, and it's a skill I've developed over the years. And I wrote a lot in college, and since being in business, you don't write the same way, but I do this on the side. And so I recently finished at least the second or third draft of this novel, and a few more weeks of editing, and I'll be ready to submit to publishers. But the summary is called Cornerstone, and I wanted to tell the story of a convention, so a meeting where people gather together to talk about why the governance is out of control, too much power, discuss how a meeting where different representatives get together to talk about fixing their government and proposing solutions. And I wanted to talk about that in a book, and tell some history with it, going back to Moses, through the tribes of Israel and the Israeli government, all the way up to the founding of England, and tell some of that history and wrap it around a love story set in 10th century England, and a quest and other things. It's a coming of age story about a son of a carpenter, and I won't divulge all the details, but there's a close one dies, a loved one escapes, there's a quest and a journey, and all through it the main male character learns a lot of male spirituality and learns about this governance that he wasn't aware of. And the book is part of a trilogy. So the first book is mostly finished, and then you learn more about some of the history and the convention in the second and third books before there's a resolution. So yeah, it all started last year in February, where I've been part of this organization called Convention of States for the last 4+ years. And simply, Convention of States is an organization that wants to use Article 5 in the Constitution to really put a check on the federal government. So the federal government's gotten way too large, and no matter where you are, left or right, Democrat or Republican, the main problem is the federal government's way too large, way too obtrusive, taking decisions away from the states, and federal debt is way out of control. We can list all the problems, but the main problem is it's way too large. Washington, D.C. is out of control. And the founders put a solution in the Constitution to rein that in through an Article 5 convention. where representatives get together, like I say in the book, and talk about the problems, and then the proposed solutions are amendments that would get debated in a convention and then ratified by state legislatures or state conventions. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm really passionate about that topic, and I want to tell that kind of idea in a novel, in a story.
So that's really exciting, and it sounds like there's a lot to catch the reader's interest. When
yeah,
do you
more
expect
so than just the convention, because there's a love story, which is most of the book. There's a lot of spirituality in it too, which is important about my faith. And the first book is mostly about male spirituality, and there are strong female characters. And the second book is going to be primarily about female spirituality in terms of a Christian faith, and so I'm going to explore that in the second book. Sorry to cut you off.
Where will it be available for sale for someone when will it be published?
So, good questions. I have no idea. Yeah, I'm just learning all this process and trying to find an agent that's interested in historical fiction and romance. And then my original goal was to reach a larger audience to inform about a convention. And I'm just learning about the whole process. So I have no idea that I can keep your listeners aware once it is published, but I don't know.
Yeah, I hear your pain. There's a lot to learn, and especially in the new world of digital and all that. I mean, but
still trying to figure out the best way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. But just to write a book, kudos to you for getting that done. Okay, so my next question, I want to ask you, kind of pick your brain about a few topics related to work. And my first question is, for young men like yourself, maybe even a little younger than you, who are just starting out their career, as well as men who are older, who maybe are thinking about changing their career, do you have any advice for them as far as what factors they should consider when thinking about what they should do with their life?
Yeah, it's always a good question, and I'm still finding out what that is for me as well. I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think the best thing is think through what you want. And I'd have to give you like this matrix that we have at work. It's what do you want? What are you passionate about? Like, what is your profession? Like, what do you do at work? What motivates you? What's your mission? Or your vocation? Like, what do you like doing to have fun? There's like a balance, and you try to find where that balance is. And sometimes it's difficult to do. And I think you just need to rely on others to help you. Try to know yourself, but ultimately try to find a mentor, I would say, that can understand you and can help you navigate kind of that difficult road of deciding where you want to go. I think a lot in your 20s, you're really in the learning process, and you can learn throughout your career. But like my advice to somebody just out of college and joining a company or whatever is just to try to learn as much as you can and be willing to learn. And then if you're changing career like I did, kind of midway through, it was exploring what I wanted to do. And for me, like the mission part of it's really important, and like a purpose. And what I'm learning is you may not get all that at your full-time job. You may have to do some of that outside of your full-time job, and that's okay. You just have to accept that, I guess. And so really just sitting down, and I think prayer plays a lot of part of it. Praying about, like, write it down on paper, pray about it, think it over, talk with somebody, get a mentor, and just discuss that. I have that discussion with people. Like, I don't have all the answers, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I think just talking to people, somebody who would give you honest feedback, constructive feedback is very helpful.
Do you have a mentor now?
Not at Caterpillar, but a few throughout Raleigh Triangle. Some from grad school, some from the church. So I don't have only one mentor at Caterpillar, but several, I guess, in different industries.
Do you have any suggestions for how to find a good mentor?
I think your church is a good place to start, and there's always networking opportunities in your industry that if you would like to, and maybe just ask at work. I mean, some companies do better than others, I would say. Just ask your boss at work, like, is there a mentor program? Does the company have a mentorship program? Is somebody outside of your main career field, your main role? And then if not, seek professional organizations, church, things like that.
Now, you mentioned a little bit ago about, sometimes you might have to pursue your passions, your interests outside of work. I know that, you're real involved in convention states and, you've written a book. I'm sure you do other things as well. Do you have any thoughts on what does it mean today to have a balance between your work and your personal life? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think Caterpillar does a really great job of focusing on the balance of life and work, because most of us end up working most of our lives, and you need that balance. Otherwise, you'll get drained and burned out. And that's been a struggle for me over the years, because when I was active duty, even the last few years, I've been doing so much, and I've started to take it easy and resting more and trying to find more of a balance. So I think it is possible to find a balance. You just got to prioritize. And for me, eventually I'll get married and have kids, and that'll become my main priority. But right now I'm not doing that. I'm not married, no kids, and so I'm prioritizing my passions outside of work with doing the 9 to 5, whatever, 8 hours a day at the full-time job, and then trying to balance my passions on the side throughout the week without killing myself. But I think just sitting down and prioritizing and budgeting your time is important.
Any tips for exactly how you budget your time?
I'd like to say I write it down. Mostly it's just been in my head. I think I've written it down in the past. You do your budget for your finances. It's written out. And the recommendation I've gotten for people is actually write down, how do you actually spend your time in a day? And so maybe I need to do that again. I haven't done that recently, but I've done that in the past. I need to think through exactly where do I spend my time each day. And I was surprised the last time I did it a few years ago, so I'll probably be surprised by where I actually spend my time now.
Yeah, when you really think about it, Doc, write it down. I suppose it's kind of an eye opener.
Yeah.
Well, this is a question I ask a lot, and that is there? What do you think is the greatest misunderstanding men have about their work?
Yeah, I think the greatest misunderstanding is, I guess, what work is for. Ultimately, no matter what profession we're in, the goal is to glorify God in whatever work that is. Whether you're an engineer, sales, whatever, use that opportunity to form relationships with people, and when given the chance, glorify God and share your faith. And the pastor at our church talks about that frequently. Maybe we're not called to be. Not everybody's called to be missionaries or a pastor or whatever, but we're all called to love one another and ultimately glorify God by loving others, wherever that is. And for many of us, we spend a lot of time at work, so it can be difficult, especially if you're not focused on it. You just go to work with a wrong attitude. I've had that in the past, and so that's why the faith keeps me honest and accountable. But I think that's probably the greatest misconception is, work can be work, it can be your mission, it can be your purpose. It can just be get paid to support your family, whatever it is, but using that and spending time with people and ultimately glorifying God when you get the chance. All
right. I don't know how long your commute is. I have a really long commute, but I was wondering if you have any, if you would share with us how you use your commute. In other words, is there anything specific you listen to or do during your commute to kind of make the most of your work commute?
So I don't have many meetings now during my commute, but one way to save time so you can balance your time with your family later on in the evening is I would suggest trying to schedule meetings if you can during your commute. We can have a lot of meetings over the phone, whoever you're working with for your company. If you can try to schedule meetings during your commute, that'd be good. For me right now, since I don't have meetings, I just try to unwind. I listen to Christian music and just try to stay present by listening to that music during my 25-minute commute in the morning and then in the afternoons or evenings.
Mike, do you have a favorite scripture, or some people call it their life verse, that you want to share with us and why it's your favorite?
Yeah, the prodigal son story in Luke chapter 15 is my favorite. So it's more than a verse, actually. Obviously, it's a story, but I love stories. And part of the book that I wrote is a prodigal son story. So the main male character leaves and he ends up being rescued. And I won't get into all the details, but it's partially a prodigal son story. So I really love that story. It tells more about God the Father than the Son. It's more about the Father than the Son in the story, but Prodigal Son's my favorite story, and so I kind of wrote about it in the novel, and I think it's a great story.
It really does give us a glimpse into the heart of our Father, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to devote the book to fathers, because fatherhood is so important, and there are many kids that don't have fathers. The fathers may be there, but they may be absent, or lots of different fathers out there. But I think fatherhood is so important, and there's a fatherhood theme throughout the book, and so I want to just dedicate the book just to say to fathers in it. So yeah, fathers are very important, not just our God, our Father, but our earthly fathers too.
Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap things up?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it was very good, and just I know each other from Convention of States, and I'd encourage people to go to the website, conventionofstates.com, and take a look at it. And I think it's well worth the time.
I agree with you on that. Okay, my last question is, if someone wanted to follow up with you, Mike, to talk with you some more about what we've been talking about today, or just to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Thank you. Yeah, the best way is my email. So Mike Westrich at hotmail.com. So just Mike, it's all lowercase, MikeWestrich at hotmail.com. So email is the best way to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Thank you for your time, Mike, and you have a great day.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, have a safe drive. See ya.
Okay, bye-bye.
Men at Work, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. We just heard about Mike Westrich's journey being spirit-led and living out his Christian faith at his work. Each of our journeys are unique, but hopefully you've heard something in this episode to inspire you and give direction for your own personal daily work life. You can find links and other information from this show at davehilgendorf.com. If you'd like to leave a prayer or prayer request or comment, which I will likely share in a future episode, please call 641-315-7900. Enter 524-645#. Until next time, have a great day and God bless.